The first sound wasn't a warning. It didn't rise through alarms or ripple across encrypted channels. No sirens, no flashing indicators, no coded signals of imminent collapse. The Galactic Council Chamber, an arena where entire civilizations had been condemned or spared with a single vote, was prepared for tension, for hostility, even for war, but not for laughter. It began as a single note. Human, sharp, unfiltered. It cut through the chamber like a fracture in glass. Small at first, almost dismissible. A reflex, perhaps, a moment of instability. Something biological, something insignificant. Except it didn't stop. The sound carried. It echoed against the immense curved walls of the council spire, reverberating through layers of engineered acoustics designed to amplify authority, not emotion. It slipped between translation matrices, bypassing interpretation, refusing to be softened into diplomatic equivalence. It remained exactly what it was. A laugh, raw, unapologetic, alive. For a fraction of a second, the chamber failed to respond. Delegates froze mid-motion. Luminescent beings flickered out of sync. Mechanical observers paused their continuous scans, as if recalculating the meaning of sound itself. Even the ancient stone-like sentinels, species that had not moved in centuries, registered a deviation in atmospheric vibration, because laughter did not belong here. Not in a place where extinction-level decisions were routine. Not where entire star systems waited in suspended judgment. Not where emotion had long ago been categorized as weakness, optimized out of diplomatic evolution. And yet, there it was, uncontained, uninvited. The human stood at the center of it, small by comparison, fragile by every measurable standard. No exoskeletal armor, no psionic aura, no adaptive shielding, just flesh, breath, presence. And that laugh, across the chamber, systems began to react. Threat analysis engines lit up in cascading sequences. Emotional deviation flags triggered across multiple species security protocols. Fleet command nodes outside the spire received microbursts of alert signals, subtle but urgent. Weapons recalibrated in orbit, not fired, but awakened, watching, waiting, because something was wrong. Not violently wrong. Worse. Unexplainably wrong. The laughter tapered, not abruptly, not suppressed, but naturally, like it had completed a thought no one else could hear. The echo lingered longer than it should have, as if the chamber itself was reluctant to let it go. And in that lingering, something shifted, not in the room, in perception. Across every tactical display embedded within the Council's neural network, stars flickered, not dimming, not failing, flickering. Like signals being reinterpreted by something beyond the systems designed to observe them. Astronomical data stuttered. Constellation maps briefly desynchronized. Distance readings returned fractional inconsistencies that had no physical explanation. Entire sectors of monitored space registered hesitation, as if reality itself had paused, just long enough to notice the sound. No alarms followed. No catastrophic failures. Everything remained operational. But nothing felt stable. The human lowered their heads slightly, shoulders easing, breath settling. The moment passed for them, but not for the galaxy, because something had heard that laugh, not through speakers, not through sensors, but through the fabric of observation itself. And for the first time in the history of the Galactic Council, the universe didn't feel like a stage being watched. It felt like something had just turned around and started watching back. The Galactic Council Spire did not merely exist, it dominated existence. Suspended at the gravitational heart of the Orion Nexus, it rose like a monument carved from the certainty of civilizations that believed they had mastered time, law, and survival. Its architecture defied single-species logic. Spiraling tiers of luminous alloy, translucent corridors suspended over vacuum, entire chambers folded into a higher dimensional space, so that more delegates could occupy the same physical point without collision. From a distance, it looked like a star had been taught to hold its shape. Inside, the air was engineered perfection, balanced across 1,000 atmospheric preferences, layered with invisible fields that adjusted pressure, gravity, and chemical composition with silent precision. The light itself was curated. Soft, omnidirectional, bending gently across surfaces so that no species stood in shadow unless they chose to. And still it felt oppressive, because this was not a place built for comfort. It was built for judgment. Thousands of civilizations were present, each occupying their designated strata within the spire's immense central chamber. Some existed as towering physical forms plated in armor that doubled as life support. Others appeared only as shifting projections, streams of data given shape, so they could be seen arguing. Some were collective minds, speaking through unified voices that resonated like harmonic frequencies through the structure itself. Every one of them had power. Every one of them had history written in conquest. And every one of them was watching the human. Captain Elias Mercer stood alone at the convergence point, the exact center of the chamber where all gravitational vectors balanced into stillness. It was not an accident. The Council placed new species here deliberately, forcing them into the gaze of everything that could judge them. Mercer's boots touched a surface that wasn't quite solid, a stabilized energy lattice that adjusted to his weight in real time. Beneath him, layers of infrastructure extended downward into depths no map fully described. Above him hovered the verdict sphere, an immense construct of rotating light and data, its surface constantly rewriting itself with laws, probabilities, and outcomes. It did not just interpret decisions. It enforced them. Mercer knew what it could do. Every human envoy did. Entire civilizations had vanished from Council records not through war, but through resolution. A decision rendered so absolute that reality itself aligned with it. And yet, he stood there unarmed. No escort ships waited in orbit. No hidden fleets lurked beyond sensor range. Earth had sent him alone, not as a show of weakness, but as something far more deliberate. Trust, or defiance. Sometimes the line between them was thin enough to disappear. Mercer's uniform was simple, dark, functional, marked only by the insignia of Earth's unified delegation. No medals, no ceremonial armor, nothing that translated well into alien concepts of status. To most in the chamber, he looked incomplete, but his eyes told a different story. They moved constantly, not in fear, but in awareness, taking in scale, patterns, behavior, the way certain delegates leaned forward when power shifted, the way others remained still, conserving motion like a resource. He had trained for this. Years of psychological conditioning, first contact simulations, cultural deconstruction. Humanity didn't survive first contact by strength. It survived by understanding faster than anyone else. Still, something felt off. Not in the chamber. Beyond it, a pressure just outside perception, like standing on a planet moments before tectonic plates decided to move. Mercer inhaled slowly, steady, measured. He wasn't supposed to speak yet. Protocol dictated silence until recognized by the Council's primary authority. Anything else would be considered disruption, possibly aggression. But then, something broke. Not physically, not structurally. Something contextual. A thought misaligned. A realization surfacing too quickly to suppress. And before doctrine could catch up with instinct, he laughed, soft at first, then real. And the moment it left him, he knew the room would never be the same again. At first, the chamber didn't understand what had happened. Not emotionally, not conceptually, not even mechanically. It simply paused. Across the vast expanse of the Galactic Council spire, systems designed to interpret every known form of communication struggled to assign meaning to the sound that just echoed through them. Translation matrices flickered, not failing, but searching for an equivalent that did not exist. Emotional indexing algorithms returned conflicting results: amusement, defiance, instability, threat. None of them aligned. All of them triggered. A human had laughed, and the galaxy did not know what that meant. Captain Elias Mercer's voice had already faded, but the echo lingered in the chamber like a ripple trapped in glass. Delegates froze mid-motion, their biological or synthetic forms caught in states of interrupted intent. Some leaned forward instinctively, predatory instincts demanding clarification. Others recoiled, not in fear, but in caution, the kind reserved for phenomena that did not behave within known parameters. Because laughter here was not neutral. It was unpredictable, and unpredictability was dangerous. High above Mercer, The verdict sphere accelerated its rotational patterns. Streams of luminous data began cascading across its surface, faster than visible interpretation could track. It was analyzing not the sound itself, but the implications of it. Probability chains unfolded and collapsed in microseconds. Simulation branches opened, explored outcomes, and terminated. None reached a stable conclusion. Around the chamber's perimeter, defensive protocols awakened without command, not fully deployed, just ready. Gravitational stabilizers adjusted to accommodate sudden shifts in mass distribution. Environmental fields tightened, subtly reinforcing structural integrity as if preparing for an impact no one could see. Outside the spire, orbiting fleets reacted faster. Across multiple species, command systems registered an anomaly event originating from the Council's core. Automated responses initiated in silence. Targeting arrays powered on, not locked, not fired, but active. Weapons that had not been touched in centuries awakened with a low hum across the vacuum, because something had changed, and no one knew what. Counselor Xyler of the Vorn Dominion leaned forward from its elevated platform, its segmented body casting layered shadows across the chamber floor. Its eyes, multiple-faceted, incapable of blinking, focused entirely on the human below. "Explain your emotional output," it demanded. The translation arrived clean, precise, controlled. Mercer looked up at it. For a brief moment, something passed across his expression. Not fear, not regret, but realization. The kind that comes when a line has already been crossed, and there is no version of events where it hasn't happened. He wiped at the corner of his eye, breath steadying. "Sorry," he said, voice calm, almost casual. "It's just you all look so serious all the time." Silence, not the ordinary kind. This silence had weight, because the chamber did not know how to respond. Several species attempted to process humor, and failed. Their cultural databases lacked equivalent structures. Others recognized it, and that recognition made things worse. Because humor, in its rawest form, implied perspective, and perspective implied distance. Distance from fear. Distance from consequence. Distance from them. A subtle distortion passed through the chamber systems. Time-delayed dampeners misfired across localized sectors, causing brief temporal stutters. Fractions of seconds stretching, compressing, correcting themselves. Gravitational fields adjusted unpredictably, as if recalibrating around a variable that refused to remain constant. It wasn't an attack, but it felt like one. Deep within the Council's oldest protocols, buried beneath layers of evolutionary adaptation and interspecies compromise, one directive activated quietly. Unknown behavior prior to negotiation equals maximum uncertainty event, and uncertainty had always been the beginning of collapse. Mercer stood at the center of it all, no longer laughing, but the damage was done. Because in a chamber built on control, prediction, and absolute authority, a human had just introduced something none of them could contain. Not a weapon, not a threat, something far worse. The possibility that they were no longer the ones defining the rules. The verdict sphere did not wait for permission. It never had. Suspended above the chamber like a second sun forged from law and inevitability, it responded the only way it knew how, by seeking definition, by forcing the unknown into something measurable, classifiable, controllable. Its surface ignited with cascading bands of white gold light, each layer representing a different tier of analysis: biological, psychological, probabilistic, existential. A beam descended, not harsh, not violent, precise. It enveloped Captain Elias Mercer in a column of pale illumination that hummed with the quiet authority of systems that had never once failed. Across the chamber, every delegate leaned in, physically, digitally, instinctively. This was the moment where ambiguity ended, where the Council's greatest instrument would reduce uncertainty into fact. Mercer did not move. He felt it, though. The scan wasn't just surface deep. It pressed through him, not physically, but conceptually, like something was reading not only his body, but the patterns behind his thoughts, the intent behind the laughter, the meaning behind the moment. For a fraction of a second, he considered resisting, not physically. That would be meaningless, but mentally, holding something back. He didn't, because humanity had already learned something the Council hadn't yet realized. Some things couldn't be hidden. The sphere processed. Time slowed, not in reality, but in perception. Streams of data unfolded across its surface in spiraling sequences, faster than any biological mind could follow. Simulations branched outward like exploding stars, modeling outcomes based on Mercer's behavior, extrapolating human psychology across centuries, projecting future threat scenarios across entire galactic timelines. It had done this before, thousands of times. It had judged empires, erased anomalies, stabilized civilizations. It had never hesitated until now, a flicker, barely visible, but real, across its luminous surface. The flowing data stuttered. Just once. A single disruption in perfect continuity. Then another. Within the beam. Mercer felt it. Not scanning. Searching. The sphere wasn't reading him anymore. It was trying to understand something it couldn't map. Deep within its core processing layers. Something unexpected had emerged. A feedback loop. Not from Mercer's biology. Not from his neural patterns. From the act of observation itself. The sphere was simulating his laughter. Replaying it. Analyzing intent. But every time it did, the simulation changed. Not randomly. Deliberately. As if something inside the model was reacting. Across the chamber, warning glyphs began to bloom silently across control interfaces. Delegates didn't speak. They didn't need to. The data was shared, translated, understood instantly. Threat modeling, unstable. Prediction tree, collapsing. Counselor Zyler shifted, its rigid posture breaking for first time. Continue analysis. It commanded. The sphere obeyed and broke itself further. The beam intensified, not brighter, but deeper. It pushed past conventional thresholds, diving into layers of cognition that bordered on abstraction. It was no longer analyzing Mercer as an individual. It was analyzing humanity. And that was where it failed, because humanity did not resolve into clean variables. It contradicted itself, adapted mid-measurement, changed under observation, and somewhere within that chaos, something else appeared. Not a signal, not a presence, a condition. The simulations began returning null-space artifacts, regions of model reality where no data could exist, yet something clearly did, a blind spot inside the sphere's own perception. And from that blind spot, a response, not transmitted, not spoken, but felt across every connected system. Observation detected. The chamber went cold. The sphere froze, not powered down, not damaged, just halted, as if something had reached into its processes and quietly, effortlessly, placed a hand over its function. The beam around Mercer flickered once, then vanished. Silence followed. Heavy, absolute. The verdict sphere, judge of galaxies, architect of outcomes, remained suspended above them, unmoving, uncertain, and for the first time in its existence, it did not deliver a verdict. Alarms did not erupt. They failed to. Across the Galactic Council spire, systems designed to scream in the face of catastrophe simply hesitated. Signals initiated, cascaded to the network, and then stopped midway, as if something had reached into the circuitry of causality and removed the permission to panic. Outside the spire, fleets reacted first. Threx war cruisers aligned targeting arrays toward the station's core, their weapon spines unfolding like mechanical predators preparing to strike. Voran energy lattices flared into defensive configurations, bending space into hardened shields. Dozens of other civilizations followed suit. Instinct overriding diplomacy, survival overriding protocol. And then, nothing fired. Command signals were issued, confirmed, reissued, but the weapons did not respond. Not jammed, not disabled, ignored. Inside the chamber, the silence deepened into something unbearable. Delegates shifted, systems recalibrating in real time, searching for control pathways that no longer existed. Entire tactical networks fed back empty confirmations, command accepted, action undefined. At the center of it all, Captain Elias Mercer took a single step forward. The sound of his boot contacting the energy lattice beneath him echoed far louder than it should have. Or perhaps everything else had grown too quiet. He looked up, not at the delegates, not at the frozen verdict sphere, but beyond it, through layers of structure and vacuum, towards something none of them could see. "They're not responding to you anymore," he said. His voice was calm. That was the most unsettling part. Counselor Zyler surged forward, its towering form casting fractured shadows across the chamber. "What have you done?" it demanded, its voice no longer measured, no longer diplomatic. Mercer shook his head, slightly. Nothing you'd recognize as an action. Around them, the spire's internal systems began shedding functionality, not collapsing but stepping back. Environmental controls simplified. Defensive grids reduced to passive states. Even the translation matrices softened, as though language itself was being deprioritized. The galaxy was still there, but its complexity was thinning. Mercer exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of a truth he had never been allowed to say out loud. Not here. Not to them. "You built everything on the assumption that intelligence means control," he continued. "Prediction. Dominance. You measure power by how much of the future you can force into alignment." He glanced at the frozen sphere. "That works until something stops playing by those rules." A low vibration passed through the spire, not physical, but perceptual, like reality itself adjusting its stance. Outside, the stars seemed quieter, not dimmer, just less available. Across every fleet, every command bridge, every war mind linked to the Council, a realization spread with terrifying clarity. They were no longer operating at the highest level of authority. Something else had context they did not. Something else had priority. Mercer's gaze hardened, not in anger, but in certainty. "You tried to model us," he said, "to simulate what we do, what we become." A faint smile touched his lips, not mocking, not triumphant, knowing. "But you missed the part where we stopped thinking of a universe as something to conquer." He lifted his head slightly, as if acknowledging something vast and unseen. "We learned how to listen first." The chamber felt it then, not as a presence entering, but as a tension focusing. Every instinct screamed to react, to defend, to fight, to do something. But there was nothing to act against. No target, no enemy, just a boundary they could not cross. Mercer let the silence stretch. Then, softly, almost gently, he laughed again. And this time, the darkness didn't fall as an attack. It arrived like a decision already made. The darkness did not arrive like destruction. It arrived like completion. One moment, the Galactic Council spire still existed, its vast geometry intact, its layered systems humming in fragile, uncertain persistence. The next, it was no longer being rendered in the way its creators had always assumed reality worked. Not erased, not shattered, simply deprioritized. Light didn't vanish. It withdrew. Sound didn't stop. It lost meaning. Across the chamber, delegates felt the shift differently. Some perceived it as silence swallowing vibration. Others as pressure building behind their perception, like their senses were no longer trusted to report truth. Entire species relying on electromagnetic awareness found their inputs replaced with static, not interference, but absence, as if something had decided they did not need to see everything anymore. And yet, they still existed. Captain Elias Mercer stood at the center of it all, unchanged, his breathing steady, his posture relaxed, almost impossibly so in a moment that should have been panic, chaos, collapse. But he had seen this before. Not here, not at this scale, but in fragments, in signals, in the quiet spaces between human discovery and human understanding. The spire's towering structures began to lose definition, not crumbling, not breaking, but softening at the edges, as though they were concepts being forgotten mid-thought. The verdict sphere above flickered once, its infinite calculations reduced to a single, unresolved state. No verdict, no authority, no control. Outside, fleets still hovered in orbit, massive warships, weapons capable of erasing suns, engines powerful enough to bend gravity itself. All of them idle, not because they were disabled, because they no longer had permission to matter. A Threx commander attempted to issue a firing command. The signal left its system and returned unanswered, not blocked, not rejected, just irrelevant. That was when the realization spread fully. Cold, absolute, irreversible. They were no longer operating inside the highest layer of reality. Something else was. Something that did not speak, did not negotiate, did not need to. Mercer looked upward, beyond the fading geometry of the chamber, beyond the fleets, beyond the stars themselves, toward that vast, incomprehensible awareness that had never truly been distant. For the first time since his laughter broke the silence, there was no trace of humor in his expression, only understanding. "We thought we were alone when we first reached the stars," he said quietly, his voice carrying effortlessly despite the collapsing context around him. "Then we thought we were powerful." He paused. A breath, a memory. Then we realized something was listening. Around him, civilizations that had defined existence through dominance began to feel something they had never allowed themselves to consider. Perspective. Scale. Insignificance not as weakness, but as truth. Mercer lowered his gaze back to them, not as a conqueror, not as a victor, but as something far more unsettling. A witness. "We didn't tame it," he continued. "We didn't control it. We didn't even understand it." The darkness deepened, not closing in, but settling like a boundary being gently enforced. "We just learned one thing," he said. A final pause, the kind that separates everything that came before from everything that follows. When it listens, the chamber held still. Time, if it still existed, waited. We don't give a reason to stop. And just like that, the spire stabilized. Not fully restored, not returned, but allowed. Systems flickered back online, in reduced states. Light returned in softer gradients. The verdict sphere remained dim, its authority permanently questioned. Outside, fleets still hovered. But no one moved, no one fired, no one even considered it. Because somewhere beyond their reach, beyond their understanding, something was still watching, not as a threat, not as a guardian, but as a constant. And for the first time in galactic history, peace wasn't enforced. It was observed,